You've heard stories about faith, right? But what if the greatest miracles are born in silence?
We tell the stories of those who stood when the world told them to give up. Stories of faith, real voices, eternal hope, and the power of believing. She was 9 years old, with hunger in her stomach, but on her lips, she whispered words in English that no one around her understood. "One day I will see the world," said the barefoot girl from the mountains of Ecuador. The world laughed. God listened, and what happened next changed 3 nations, touched thousands of lives, and proved that the greatest miracles often begin exactly where the world stops looking. Ecuador has never been kind to those born poor, and Elena Cruz was born right there, among mountains that touched the sky, but in a house where there was never enough bread to touch the table. Daughter of a bricklayer with calloused hands, and a mother who washed clothes until her fingers bled, Elena grew up hearing a sentence repeated like a prayer in reverse. "Study? That is for people with a last name." But something inside that little girl refused to accept it. A spark, a whisper, a holy unrest. At 9 years old, glued to an old school radio, she fell in love with the sound of a foreign tongue, English. Words that danced differently, words that promised worlds beyond those mountains. And then came the cruelest winter, the one that freezes even hope itself. Hunger came knocking, and refused to leave. That is when Doña Esperanza appeared, an old neighbor, bent by time, but upright in faith, with a small piece of bread wrapped in newspaper, and a Bible so worn that its pages looked like petals. "God sees what the world ignores, child," she said softly, and between trembling verses and crumbs of love, Elena did not just meet Jesus. She found the Father who would never leave her. Faith was born there, on the very ground where everything was missing, and the emptiness became a promise. At the small local school, Elena met Clara and Samuel, 2 siblings with bright eyes who invited her to something that would change her life forever. A small church with peeling walls and wooden benches. There, between songs sung with no instruments and prayers that rose like pure incense, a calling was born, a calling that made no sense. At 19, while most were still fighting to escape poverty, Elena received an invitation that sounded like madness to go to India, alone, with no money, with no safety net. "But I have barely left my town," she thought, and then she heard it, a gentle thunder inside her chest. "I did not call you because you are ready. I called you because I am." The journey was brutal, the language impossible, and the persecution real, violent, suffocating. But in the dusty alleys of a forgotten village, she met a Christian family, poor like her, but rich in grace. And through one simple act, sharing bread with hungry children, the miracle began. Elena turned that humble house into a shelter. The shelter became a school, and the school became a refuge where the gospel bloomed like a stubborn seed in the desert. Children began to pray, parents began to believe, and Jesus became real in that village. The years passed, like the wind, swift, but unforgettable. At 32, Elena met Thomas, a young English missionary with eyes full of faith and a heart burning with the same fire that burned within her. He did not see Elena as fragile or untouchable. He saw her as an equal, a warrior, bride of Christ. Before she was ever his own, they married beneath a tree in the middle of the village. No luxury, no grand celebration, just wildflowers, the laughter of barefoot children, and the tangible presence of God as their witness. 5 children were born from that love. And in each small face, Elena saw a piece of the miracle God weaves in the shadows, when no one is watching, posting, or applauding. Together, Elena and Thomas loved. They suffered, they bled, they served. They planted gardens where only ashes once lay. When Elena turned 60, she had already founded 14 missionary schools across 3 countries. But what marked her most were not the numbers. It was the eyes of the people she met, a tight hug of a mother whispering, "My son met Jesus because of you." The letter from a young pastor in Bangladesh. "You taught me that God uses the broken." The trembling voice of an old woman saying, "I thought God had forgotten me until you came." In her final days, beneath the same sky that watched her birth, a young missionary approached her. "How did you do all this?" she asked, "with so little?" Elena smiled, that smile that carried mountains and miracles, looked at the golden horizon, and replied with the voice that never lost its strength. "I never had much, only enough faith to take the first step, and a God who took care of the rest." Today, the name Elena Cruz echoes through stories the world cannot forget, in the voices of children singing in Hindi, Bengali, and Spanish, in the hands that now serve because one day they were served, in the footsteps of new missionaries who dare to believe because she dared first, because when the world said, "You cannot," God said, "Go, I will be there." Not every faith begins with a spectacular miracle. Some begin with hunger, with a piece of bread wrapped in old newspaper, with a worn-out Bible in the hands of a forgotten neighbor. But when that bread is shared with love, when that faith is planted in dry ground, God makes entire gardens grow. Maybe you are hearing this from a place where everything is missing, or from a place where there is plenty of comfort, but not enough purpose. Elena had only one thing, something you can have right now, faith enough to take the first step. The rest, God takes care of, because the ones the world forgets are exactly the ones God chooses to change it. Their stories remind us that faith still moves mountains, that obedience still changes lives.
Essas histórias nos lembram que a fé ainda move montanhas, que a obediência ainda muda vidas.